Welcome to your deep dive. Today we're tackling this idea of negotiation
Okay.
with Chris Voss's book Never Split the Difference. Have you
Right.
heard of this one?
I have. Yeah. It's a fascinating look.
It's really interesting.
Yeah, negotiation and how.
He's got this really interesting background.
Yeah, he
I
does.
was an FBI hostage negotiator.
Yeah,
So we're talking about some really high stakes stuff, but he's applying it
exactly.
to everyday life, and we're going to be looking at the first 6 chapters of this book for you
Yeah,
guys.
it's like this. It's like he takes all of that intense experience
Right.
and then he's like, how can we use this to just like figure out where to go to dinner or.
I know. And that's what I thought was so fascinating is that we're negotiating all the time and we don't realize
I
it.
don't even think about it.
Right. And he even says, like, just deciding where to eat with your family.
Yeah.
That's a negotiation.
It is, absolutely.
And then the other thing that I thought was so interesting
Yeah.
is this idea, and you tell me what you think about this emphasis on the power of no.
Oh, yeah.
It seems so counterintuitive.
It is because we're always told like we have to get to yes. Like
Yes.
yes is the goal.
Yes is the end all be all.
Right. But actually, like when you think about it from the other side, like when somebody says no, it gives them a sense of control
Hmm.
and that makes them feel safe.
Okay.
And when they feel safer, then they're more likely to actually open up and have a real conversation.
That's interesting because I think, especially for people who are maybe conflict avoidant,
Right.
hearing no can just shut them down completely.
Oh, absolutely.
And so to think about it that way, that no can actually open up the conversation,
It can be like a doorway.
that's a really interesting way to reframe it.
Yeah. And he actually gives this really powerful example in the book
Okay.
about a hostage situation where just by getting the hostage taker to say no,
Wow.
he was able to kind of like de-escalate the whole thing.
Huh.
And it was like this unexpected breakthrough just from that one word.
It seems like such a small word,
I know.
but I guess in the right context, it can be really powerful.
Absolutely. And that actually leads into another fascinating technique that he talks about,
Okay.
which is mirroring.
Mirroring.
Have you ever heard of this?
I have, but when I think about it, I always think about like,
Yeah.
you know that really awkward thing where someone's trying to like copy you?
Not exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you don't want to be like a parrot.
No, exactly. And it just gets so weird.
Yeah, it's creepy.
Yeah. So how are we talking about this?
So it's not about like mimicking somebody.
Okay.
It's more about subtly reflecting like their words or maybe their behavior
Mm.
just to build rapport.
So it's like you're showing them that you're really listening.
Exactly. And
Excellent.
and the reason this works is because it creates this sense of like similarity.
Mm.
Like you're on the same wavelength,
Mm.
and that can really calm somebody down
Okay.
and make them feel more comfortable. And then guess what? They start talking more.
Oh, so it's like a way to get more information out of them.
It is
Mm.
because they feel like they're being heard.
Okay, that's interesting.
So you're getting all these valuable insights.
So when you're saying mirroring, you're talking about
Yeah.
like actually using some of the same words that they're using.
You can repeat back a phrase,
Okay.
or you can even just like adopt a similar tone of voice.
Okay.
But the key is subtlety.
Yeah.
You don't want to be too obvious about it.
Right.
It's like a little dance,
Yeah. Yeah.
You're just kind of like gently reflecting back what they're giving you.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, and it all comes back to this idea of like, we all want to feel understood.
Right.
It's like a fundamental human need.
Yeah. And so if you can tap into that,
Exactly.
that's going to help you build that connection.
Absolutely, and that's really the foundation for a lot of Voss's techniques.
Okay. So speaking of understanding,
Yeah.
he talks about this concept of tactical empathy.
Yes.
And this is something that I think a lot of people get wrong because we think that empathy is about agreeing with someone.
Right.
But he makes a really important distinction.
He does.
And he's saying it's not about agreeing with someone, it's about really understanding their perspective.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
about putting yourself in their shoes
Okay.
and seeing the world through their eyes, even if you don't agree with their views.
So it's more about gathering information
It is.
than it is about
That's right.
actually like seeing eye to eye on everything.
Exactly. You don't have to agree with somebody to understand where they're coming from.
And that's where I think it gets really powerful
It does.
because then you can actually start to speak their language.
Exactly.
Like you can actually address their concerns in a way that they're going to be receptive to.
Right. And one of the techniques that he talks about for actually practicing this tactical empathy
Okay.
is labeling emotions.
Labeling emotions.
Have you ever heard of this?
I haven't. Tell me more about that.
Okay, so imagine you're like negotiating a deadline with a colleague.
Oh.
and they seem really stressed out.
Yeah.
Instead of just like pushing forward with your agenda,
Yeah.
you could say something like, it seems like you're feeling overwhelmed with everything on your plate right now.
Okay.
So you're acknowledging their emotion,
Right.
and that can really diffuse the tension and create space for like a more productive conversation.
So instead of just plowing ahead with what you want,
Right.
you're actually taking a moment to acknowledge how they're feeling.
Exactly. And by doing that, you're validating their feelings.
Right.
And that can be so powerful, especially in a tense situation.
So we're trying to get to that's right,
Yes.
not just to yes.
Exactly.
Because yes can be so superficial.
It can.
It can be like, yeah, I'm just saying yes to get you to leave me alone.
Right, exactly.
But that's right means that there's actually been some understanding.
There's a connection.
Yeah, there's a connection.
And that's where you start to build those really solid agreements.
He uses that Chinese proverb, too, about sleeping in the same bed but dreaming different dreams.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
Which I thought was so powerful because you can be in the same room with someone.
You can be looking at the same thing.
Right, but you're having a completely different experience.
Totally different interpretations.
Right, and I think that that's where a lot of conflict comes from.
Absolutely.
Is that we're not taking the time to understand each other's dreams.
To see the world through each other's eyes.
Right, and so this idea of that's right is...
It's like a bridge.
It's a bridge.
It's like that moment of connection where you're like, okay, we're on the same page.
We're getting somewhere now.
Exactly.
Okay, so the next concept that he talks about is this idea of bending reality.
Okay.
And I have to admit, when I first read that, I was like, whoa, hold on a second.
Right. That sounds a little
It sounds a little manipulative.
Yeah.
But he assures us that it's not about trickery.
No.
It's about understanding human psychology.
Right.
So can you explain a little bit about what he means by bending reality?
Sure. So one of the key concepts here is this idea of loss aversion.
Loss aversion.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of this?
I feel like I have, but remind me.
Okay, so basically it's this idea that we as humans were wired to fear loss
More than gain.
more than we desire gain.
Interesting.
So like we'll go to greater lengths to avoid losing something
Okay.
than we will to actually gain something of equal value.
Huh. That's really interesting.
Yeah, it's like we're more motivated by fear than by desire in a lot of ways.
Okay.
And so Voss argues that we can use this understanding to our advantage in negotiations.
Okay, so how do we do that?
So for example, instead of focusing on what somebody stands to gain,
Okay.
by accepting your offer, you could frame it in terms of what they stand to lose.
Oh, so it's all about the framing.
It is. It's about how you present the information.
Okay.
You're still giving them the same options,
Right.
but you're just tweaking the language a little bit.
So it appeals to that part of their brain.
Exactly. You're tapping into their natural instincts.
Okay, so I see how that could be really powerful because I know, for me personally,
Yeah.
I'm much more motivated by the fear of losing something
Right.
than I am by the potential of gaining something.
And that's true for a lot of people.
So it's like you're speaking their language in a way that they're going to understand.
And respond to.
Yeah.
On a gut level.
That's really fascinating.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes Voss's approach so effective, is that he's not just talking about like these abstract concepts.
Oh.
He's giving you practical tools that you can actually use in your everyday life.
Yeah, and I think that's what people are really looking for, is they want something that they can actually apply.
Right. They want to see results.
Yeah, and so if you can understand these underlying psychological principles,
Yes.
then you can start to use them to your advantage
And get what you want.
in a way that's not manipulative.
Right. It's about being persuasive, not manipulative.
Right, and it's about finding solutions that work for everyone.
Exactly. It's not a zero-sum game.
Right.
It's about creating win-win situations
I like that.
where everybody feels good about the outcome.
This is already so insightful, and we've only just scratched the surface.
I know, right?
I can't wait to see what other gems Voss has in store for us.
Me too. Let's dive into the next
Awesome.
chapter. Yeah, it's like finding that sweet spot, you know?
Right, where everybody feels like they got something.
Exactly. And everybody feels heard
Yeah.
and respected, and like their needs were taken into account.
So then he talks about also this concept of deadlines.
Right.
And using those strategically as part of this bending reality.
Deadlines can be powerful.
And I have to admit, I'm someone who gets very panicky when a deadline is coming up.
Sure. A lot of people do.
So how do we use deadlines ethically?
Yeah, that's the key.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because they can be very powerful, but they can also be manipulative if they're used in the wrong way.
Right.
So it's about using them thoughtfully.
So if someone's giving me a deadline, I should really make sure that I'm
Yeah, right.
not just being pressured into something.
Exactly. Like take a step back.
Yeah.
Breathe and make sure that this is actually something that you want to do.
Right, and that it aligns with your goals.
Absolutely.
And I guess if you're the one setting the deadline,
Yeah.
you also have to be really careful.
You want to make sure that it feels collaborative
Okay.
and not coercive.
Oh. So there's that balance of power again.
There is. It's always about that balance of power.
So speaking of power, he introduces this concept of calibrated questions, which sound really interesting.
Oh, they are.
Can you break those down for me?
So calibrated questions are basically these open-ended questions
Yeah.
that are designed to get the other person talking
Okay.
and revealing information. And they often start with words like how or what.
Okay.
And they avoid language that could trigger defensiveness.
Got it.
So, for example, instead of saying, can you give me a discount?
Which might just get an immediate no.
Which is probably going to get a no.
Right.
You could say something like, how can we make this work within my budget?
Okay, so you're putting the onus on them
Big-
to come up with the solution.
Right. And it opens up the conversation in a much more collaborative way.
So you're kind of making it like a shared problem-solving thing.
That's a great way to put it.
Instead of me versus you,
Excellent.
it's us working together to figure this out.
Right. And calibrated questions can also help you uncover the other person's motivations, like their constraints,
So you can better understand where they're coming from.
Exactly. Like you might ask, what are your biggest concerns about this proposal?
Okay.
That gives them a chance to air their grievances.
And then you can actually address them.
Exactly. And that can really build trust.
Because you're showing that you're listening.
You're listening and you care.
Right.
And you're willing to work with them.
So this is all about listening again.
It all comes back to listening.
Which is really the foundation of his whole approach, it seems like.
It is. It's about really paying attention
Yeah.
to what the other person is saying
Yeah.
and trying to understand their perspective.
And then he takes it even a step further
He does.
with this idea of the black swan,
Oh, yes, the black swan.
which sounds kind of ominous.
It does sound a little scary.
What is he talking about there?
So a black swan is basically a piece of hidden information
Okay.
that can completely change the course of a negotiation.
So it's like this hidden piece of the puzzle.
Exactly. It's like an ace up your sleeve.
Right, that you didn't even know you had.
And the key to finding these black swans is active listening.
So you're really listening for those clues.
You're paying attention not just to the words somebody is saying,
Okay.
but also to their tone of voice, their body language, any underlying emotions that might be bubbling beneath the surface.
It's like you're a detective almost.
You're looking for those subtle cues,
Right, trying to piece together.
the whole picture.
Yeah.
What's really going on.
And Voss reminds us that, people are emotional creatures.
Right.
We're driven by factors that we don't even fully understand ourselves sometimes.
So those hidden motivations are really important. They're key because sometimes they're the key to unlocking a successful negotiation.
So it's like peeling back the layers of the onion.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
Like you're trying to get to the core
Yeah, to the heart of the matter.
of what's really driving the other person's behavior.
And once you understand that,
Then you can start to tailor your approach accordingly.
it's not about manipulating them.
No.
It's about meeting them where they are.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about understanding their needs and finding a way to meet those needs.
In a way that also works for you.
Right. It's about finding that win-win.
Okay.
And speaking of tailoring your approach,
Yeah.
Voss also talks about the power of sweetening the deal strategically.
Now, this is something I'm really interested in because I love the idea of finding creative solutions
Right, yeah.
that go beyond just money.
And Voss really emphasizes the importance of non-cash concessions.
Okay.
So think about offering something unexpected,
Yeah.
something that demonstrates that you understand the other person's needs and values.
So it's like a personalized touch?
It is. It's about building goodwill
Okay.
and fostering a sense of reciprocity.
And it doesn't have to be something huge.
No, it can be a small gesture.
Right.
Voss gives examples like, offering a bottle of wine
Okay.
that has personal significance to the other person, or even just like a sincere compliment
Yeah.
on something unrelated to the negotiation.
So it's like you're showing that you see them as a human being,
Exactly.
not just a transaction.
You value the relationship.
Yeah. And you're in it for the long haul.
Right. And that long-term perspective can really pay off.
Okay, so this is all great in theory.
Yeah.
But what about those really tough negotiators?
Okay.
The ones who just seem like they're always trying to win at all costs.
A hard bargainers.
Yeah. How do you handle those situations?
So Voss has a name for those types.
Yeah.
He calls them the assertive.
The assertive.
And they can be intimidating.
It can be very intimidating.
But even the most assertive negotiators,
yeah.
they have vulnerabilities. They have needs.
Everyone does.
And the key is to find those pressure points.
Okay.
So it's about understanding what's driving their behavior.
What's making them so assertive?
Exactly. Like, what are their fears?
Yeah, okay.
What are their insecurities?
Is that what he means by the accusation audit?
That is one technique he recommends.
Can you explain that a little bit?
So the idea is to anticipate the accusations that the other person might throw at you.
Okay.
And then voice them yourself.
Oh, wow.
In a calm and non-defensive way.
So you're taking the wind out of their sails?
Exactly.
Before they even have a chance to set sail?
I love that analogy.
Okay, so give me an example.
Okay, so let's say you're negotiating a salary.
Okay.
And you know the other person is going to say that your expectations are too high.
Right.
You might say something like, I know my salary request might seem high, but based on my experience and the value I bring.
So you're acknowledging their potential objection.
Yes.
But you're also reframing it.
Exactly.
In a way that supports your position.
And by addressing the elephant in the room,
Right.
you disarm the other person.
Okay.
And create a space for a more rational discussion.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, and remember, even the most assertive negotiators,
Yeah.
they respond to empathy and understanding.
Okay.
If you can show them that you genuinely want to find a solution that works for both of you,
Yeah.
you'd be surprised how much more cooperative they can become.
It's like that saying, you catch more flies with honey than with vinegar.
Exactly. Sometimes a little bit of kindness
Yeah.
and understanding can go a long way.
Okay, so it's not about being a pushover.
No.
It's about finding that balance
It is.
between being assertive and being empathetic.
Exactly. And it's about understanding human nature
Yeah.
and using that knowledge
Yeah.
to navigate these complex situations effectively.
I'm learning so much from this deep dive.
Me too.
We've covered so much ground.
I know.
I feel like there's always more to discover.
There is.
Is there anything else that really stood out to you?
Yeah. One thing that really struck me is how Voss emphasizes the importance of preparation.
Preparation.
He argues that the real work of negotiation happens before you even sit down at the table.
Okay, so it's like anything else in life.
Right.
The more prepared you are,
The better your chances of success.
the better your outcome is likely to be.
Exactly. So Voss recommends doing your research,
Okay.
understanding the other person's needs and motivations.
And coming up with a game plan?
Yes, having a clear strategy for how you're going to approach the negotiation.
I think that's a great point to end on.
Yeah,
So much of this comes down to being thoughtful and strategic.
absolutely.
And that starts with preparation.
It does.
It sounds like he's really combining like psychology
Yes.
and strategy
Yes.
and just good old-fashioned prep work.
It's not about tricks.
Right.
It's about understanding human nature.
Right.
And using that knowledge to navigate these situations.
Then approaching it with a collaborative spirit, not
Right.
like I'm going to go in there and win at all costs.
Right. It's about finding solutions that work for everybody.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
If someone's listening to this and they're like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm a little overwhelmed, where do I even start?
Right.
What are the big takeaways?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that negotiation is a skill
Okay.
that anyone can learn.
Okay.
It's not something you're born with.
Right.
It's something that you can develop.
Okay.
And Voss provides a framework
Yeah.
and a set of tools that you can use
In any situation.
in any situation.
Whether it's asking for a raise or buying a car.
Absolutely. Or even just figuring out, what to eat for dinner.
So it's about empowering yourself
It is.
to get what you want.
Yes.
Without being aggressive.
Without being manipulative.
Without, being a jerk about it.
Right. It's about approaching these situations with confidence
Okay.
and with empathy.
Yeah.
And knowing that you have the skills to handle it.
Yeah. And he reminds us that it's not always just about getting what you want.
Right.
It's about
Finding a solution that works for everybody.
that works for both sides.
Yeah, those are the best negotiations.
A win-win.
The win-win, where everybody feels like they got something out of it
Yeah, I like that.
and they feel good about it.
And it builds that relationship.
Absolutely.
So you can go back to that person again.
Exactly.
And it's not like, oh gosh, here comes that person again.
Right. You want to build those bridges.
I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about today.
I think so too.
I know I'm walking away from this
Yeah.
with a whole new perspective.
Me too.
Yeah.
It's amazing how much we can learn from somebody who, spent his career negotiating with hostage takers.
Right.
It just goes to show that these skills are really universal.
So if you're out there and you want to up your negotiation game,
Yes.
definitely check out Chris Chris Voss's Never Split the Difference.
It's a great book.
It's such a fascinating read, and like you said, it's got these practical tools that you can actually put into practice.
And the best way to master any skill is to practice.
Right.
So go out there and start negotiating.
You might be surprised at what you can achieve.
You might be amazed.
Great advice.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining me for this deep dive. I always learn so much from our conversations.
It's always a pleasure. I love getting to explore these ideas with you.
And to our listeners,
Yes.
happy negotiating.